little bit of road race.
I'm wondering if we should be going in to step down.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Terry's mom. But we need to seek her mom and look at her mom. She's great.
Oh, yeah.
I'll just stand here. Why didn't you bring the dog? They should be here.
Because, like, I don't think sometimes just she didn't have an enemy in the world. You've probably known her longer than most people. Years. 64, 65. Yeah. Thank you.
Happy to be here, which is better circumstances.
Right.
You're speaking my mind.
I'll go see her.
We're all gathered today to say our goodbyes, to say our thank yous, to show our tremendous respect and appreciation for a very beloved, very special, very kind woman, our most dear Adele Fuldauer. Her Hebrew name was Lifsha Bas Alter. Just by way of introduction, sometimes the thing that describes a person the most is their name. And, I don't know if he paid so much attention to it, but the fact that her name was Adele is closely related to the Yiddish word, which means edel, which means just sweet and beloved and special,
Really? That's interesting.
which was certainly her nature. But it gets even better, because I was looking and noticing that her Yiddish name, her Hebrew name, is Livsha. And Livsha is the nickname for Liba. And I know the name Liba well, because that's my daughter's name. And if you know Hebrew, you know the word for heart in Hebrew is Lev. So the name Liba comes from Lev. And a person who's so full of heart, so full of kindness and goodness, the perfect name is Liba, or in Yiddish, Livsha. And a person who combines that love with just sweetness and goodness, of course, makes an edel as well. So we're going to begin with a selection from the Psalms. We're going to say the 23rd Psalm in Hebrew, then in English. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai, Roi Lo Eksar. B'nois deshach yarbitzeni, al mei menuchos yenachaleni. Nafshi yeshove v'yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit salmaves, lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha u'mishantecha hema yenachamoni. Tairach lefanai shulchan neged sarai. Dishanta b'shemen roshi kosi revaya. Haktov v'chesed yerdefuni kol yamei chayai. V'shavti b'beis Adonai le'orech yamim. A Psalm of David. God is my shepherd, I shall not lack. In lush meadows he lays me down. Beside tranquil waters he leads me. He restores my soul. He leads me on paths of justice for his name's sake. Though I walk in the valley overshadowed by death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the view of my torments. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for many long days. The second thing we're going to read is called the Eshes Chayil, or the Woman of Valor. In some circles, we read it at the Shabbos table after the week is over, and the wife of the house or the mother of the house has done so much work for us and taking care of us and made sure that we're okay. And at the Shabbos table, we sing the special praise to her. Eshes Chayil miyimsa v'rachok mipnei mechra batach ba'lev bala v'lashelo le'eksar gamalsu tov v'lora kol yamei chayecha darsha tzemru fishtim b'taz bechapetz kapecha haisa keniyai socher mimerchak tavi lachma b'takam ba'od laila b'titin teref levesa l'chok narosecha zamama sadeh v'tikachechu mipri kapecha natukarim chagra ba'oz masnecha b'tamez zorasecha Tama kitov sachra, lo yechbe balayla neira, yedecha shilcha v'kishor, v'kapecha samchu faleh. Kappa parseli ani, ve'yedecha shilcha le'evyon, lo sirim v'esa mishaleg, ki kol bisa levushanim. Marvadi masasala, sheish v'argaman luvusha, node b'sharim bala, b'shifto im zikne aretz. Sadi masasavatimkor, v'chagar nasnut kanani, oz v'hadar levusha, v'tischok le'yom acharon. Picha pascha behachma, besayras chesed al lishoina, Sophia halichos besa, melechem atzlus lo sochel. Kamu vanecha vayashura, baala vayehala, rabos banos hasochayo, biatalis al kulana. Sheker achein vehevel hayofi, isha yirasa adonai, hi tisalel. Tenula mipri yadecha, vihalucha besharim maasecha. An accomplished woman who can find, far beyond pearls is her value. Her husband's heart relies on her, and he shall lack no fortune. She repays his good, but never his harm, all the days of her life. She seeks out wool and linen, and her hands work willingly. She arises while it is nighttime, and gives food to her household, and a ration to her maidens. She envisions a field and buys it. With strength she girds her loins, and invigorates her arms. She discerns that her enterprise is good, her lamp is not snuffed out by the night. Her hands she stretches to the distaff, and her palms support the spindle. She fears not snow, for her household is clothed with scarlet wool. She makes a cloak to sell, and delivers a belt to the peddler. Strength and majesty are her raiment. She joyfully awaits the last day. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and a lesson of kindness is on her tongue. She anticipates the ways of her household, and partakes not of the bread of laziness. Her children arise and praise her. Her husband, he lauds her. Many daughters have amassed achievement, but you have surpassed them all. False is grace, and vain is beauty. A God-fearing woman, she should be praised. Give her the fruits of her hands, and let her be praised and the gates by her own deeds. We find ourselves today in the middle of the Jewish holiday of Sukkot, or Sukkot. And Sukkot is really a festival of joy and happiness. We finish the high holy days, we sit in our huts, we shake our four species. And so one of the traditions from that is that we don't want to diminish the joy of the holiday, even when we have something that is not so joyful to do. So at a funeral service, we reduce the crying and the tears, and we give a little bit more simple eulogies. And for many families, that would take a lot of work. You would have to really work hard to reduce the tears and to not cry so much. But the Fuldauer family, it comes naturally. When God sends lemons, they make lemonade, and with a lot of humor and jokes at the same time. So thankfully, we'll be able to talk about our most beloved Adele in the context of the holiday, and hopefully we will not only make you sad and make you tear a little bit, but also make you laugh and give you a sense of, wow, it's really great I knew this lady. And it only makes me feel joyful that I had all of these 9 or so years with someone so special. Adele was born in Cleveland. She went to John Adams High School, and she lives close to the Jewish neighborhood areas of 105th Street. Early in her life, she took piano lessons, we came to learn, and she used her skills to help teach kids piano. Later on, she held a job at the Kane Company, and then she met Don, and the rest was history. He returned from the war, and she told him that they can't get married quite yet, because he had to finish his schooling. He finished his schooling, met the requirements, and they were on to their first major challenge of their lives together, living with his parents. And so it wasn't so simple. As much as Don was very organized, you can imagine his parents were even more so. And funny enough, whenever she describes the apartment that they had after leaving the parents' house, she never called it an apartment or the place where we lived. She called it the apartment, which signifies maybe a little bit freer existence, a little bit of an easier existence that she had in the early years of her marriage. They actually moved and lived in a house in Lyndhurst, but for me, I cannot associate them with any other house than their beautiful, well-kept home across the street from me on Bendemeer Road in Cleveland Heights. They moved to Bendemeer, their palace, in 1957, just when the Severance Mall opened, and they took care of their house, every inch of it, for more than 60 years until 2017. So I was warned that, I'm supposed to tell the family stories, because they have a lot of stories, and I have a lot of stories. My family has a lot of stories, just having known the Buckholtzes and having lived across the street from the Fuldauers. So I'll do my very best to keep my stories out of it for the most part. But one of the things about Adele is that she was very sweet, very Adel. But just to get it out of the way, there were actually times where she got upset. Believe it or not. But they were very justifiable in terms of why she got upset. So just to get it out, to get it on the record, these two times we need to just discuss and we'll move on. So there's a town called Twinsburg, not too far away from here, and they have a famous twins festival. And so they decided that when the kids were 7 months old, they would bring them to the twins festival. And in those days, before, the modern changes in the way we look at life, they had a twins beauty contest. Who were the most attractive set of twins? And of course, the competition was fierce. There were a lot of very, very cute kids who entered, including those from this very family. And so what happened was, the judge announced the results. There was the runner-up and the second runner-up, and then there was the winner. And not a word was said about this family. So Adele turned very upset, very mad. She started stomping, and she went over to the judge. This is not made up. And she says, how could you look at those faces and not even consider them to be a runner-up for the best-looking twins in Cleveland? And she never forgave them, and the word is they never came back to Twinsburg again after that incident. And the second time was the family was on a tour to check out the Fuldauer heritage in Germany, to figure out where they all came from. And they were taking a tour of these casements or catacombs, some cave, and it was kind of scary in there, kind of dark, you didn't know where to go, And so there was a tour leader, and he was attempting to lead the tour, but something happened to him. He just kind of veered off, he kind of went wandering, and the family was left without a guide in the middle of these dark, scary catacombs. And when it came to the end of the tour, and they had finally miraculously found their way out, Adele went right to the guy who was leading the tour and gave him a piece of her mind. how could you do that to my family? How could you compromise their safety, and leave us alone over there? But thankfully, most of her life, she wasn't getting mad at anyone. She was actually doing what we call in Hebrew being mevater. She was ignoring anything that was done to her that upset her and just moving on. And there's an expression in English where we say, don't sweat the small stuff. And that was really who she was all about. She wouldn't let little things upset her. In fact, Dan, and some of their mechotanim, their the in-laws, used to enjoy going to a comedy club. And I guess the comedian was trying to put a skit together about marriage, asking people, how were you married for so long? And he went over to Adele and asked, how were you married for so long? And she said, the secret is very simple. Don is a very easy guy. Just joking. No, Don is a very special person, but he wasn't simple. But she would say, no. She said, I just did not sweat the small stuff. And to give an example of small stuff, sometimes in our world, we see small stuff and we make it very big, and it's hard to manage. But even small things that would happen over and over again, she never sweated about it. So a little story that I heard, and it has to do about this house that we all like to talk about, the Benjamin house, was that there was the dryer in the basement, and it had a vent, where the hot air would come through the side of the house. And for some reason it was open, like today you have those flaps that cover the vent, and you don't even know that it's there. But for whatever reason, it was an open vent, and that Don decided that it had to be covered by a window. Pardon me if I don't tell the story right. And so he designed a window that would cover the vent. But the tricky thing is you couldn't use the dryer when the window was there because you needed airflow. So every time you used the dryer, you would have to lift up the window, and then when you're done with your load, you have to go outside and you have to put the window down again. And this she did day in, day out, in winter and summer and every season. And she never complained. She never said, Don, for 60 years, she never said, Don, it's time to go to Home Depot and get one of those plastic $10 vents that everyone else has on Benjamin. So she truly, did not sweat the small stuff. So one of the things about her was that she was always helping other people. So in fact, it was very confusing for her when she actually had people who were supposed to help her. So she would have, aides in her apartment in R.H. Myers, and their job was to help her do the laundry, help her clean up the house, the apartment. But if you would see what she would actually do, is she would never let them do the work by themselves. If they went to the laundry room, she would follow them and insist on doing the laundry with them. She would sit on the couch and fold the laundry with the aide. And there were times where she needed help, maybe going to the restroom or walking from place to place. And she insisted to them that, I don't want you to hurt your back. I don't want you to get injured. Let me do this myself. I'll be okay. I don't want to hurt you. And as a result of this, the many people who had the blessing of taking care of her really, really loved her so much because they saw her kindness. And the story was told to me that a lady named Debbie, who was the physical therapist from Peter B. Lewis, during COVID, she wanted to make sure that she would come to Adele and take care of her, even though there was a worry about all the COVID stuff. And they would come in their hazmat suits, and they would sit with her, and they would help her to do the therapy. Because A, she was so kind to them, and B, she was a pretty athletic lady, and they knew this was very important to her. She was always the lady at the kid's birthday party, going around, cleaning up all the plates. And maybe before you even finished with your cake, she would already have your plate ready for the trash can. But one of the things about her was just her orderliness and her cleanliness. Everything had an order, everything had a structure, what she ate, and how she took care of her own self day in, day out. She did yoga up until a time, when it wasn't so in vogue and it wasn't so popular. She ate very, very carefully. And it wasn't always easy because, Donna would eat whatever he wanted to eat, and she would try to eat healthily. And, you can imagine all those years having to prepare 2 separate suppers was not a simple thing. And again, more about the house, that she truly kept the most meticulous house. And I know the new tenants who moved into the house, and they really thought that they walked into a time machine when they bought her house. Because they were looking at faucets in the bathroom that shined like they were brand new. This was a house that was more than 60 or 70 years old, but everything was just perfect, was impeccable, and so beautifully clean. Her kindness wasn't just in terms of giving kindness to people, but it really was on a high level. It was truly being everyone's friend. And to be a friend means you not only help people, but you care about them. You want to know about them. You want to see what their life is like. You want to stay connected to them through time. And she had many such situations. And her kids shared that, like, she would walk into a store, she'd walk into a room, and she'd point to random people they didn't even know and tell you their whole life story. She had met them once or twice, but it was very important for her to keep up on all the details of their lives in case that she were to run into them another time. She was very friendly with everyone. In the old days when the mailman would deliver mail, you'd actually talk to him. You'd actually have a conversation. You'd remember him for the holidays. And she was the person who did that to the highest degree. The garbage man, the mailman, every person who took care of the house. And so my turn for a story is that, when it was her and Don and life was quiet, there wasn't always a lot of kindness and caring available. Life was just, nothing really happened. So what did she do? A lot of the day, the front window was wide open, and she would be looking out the front window, seeing what's going on. And it really wasn't a yenta, I don't want to know what's going on, or so-and-so. It was really because she was concerned, and she really, really cared. If something was out of order, if the trash wasn't picked up, or someone didn't belong there, we would get a phone call, something doesn't look right. And all these days, people spend all that money on the Ring, you have the Ring, and you pay the monthly service, and they alert you when things are going on in your house. We had that, and it was a much, much better deal. And there was once a time where we had a situation where a car ran off the street into our front yard. And it was a pretty big crash, and no one was home. And so I got a phone call almost immediately after it happened from Adele. And so, it was finally her opportunity to help in a big, big way. She had a description of the car. She had a description of the person driving the car. She saw where they went when they drove off. And she really, really wanted to know what would happen to help us out, to make sure we figured out this problem. And we got to the bottom of it. And there's a funny story, not a funny story, a bittersweet story, that when she was at R.H. Myers, she was sitting one day on the couch, and all of a sudden she heard a thud. And when you work with seniors, when you hear a thud, it's not always a good thing. It means someone has fallen down and could be very hurt. And so she heard a thud, and she could have easily dismissed it and said, they're moving furniture, or something fell on the floor, a mattress. But she felt, no, maybe someone is at risk. And she went right downstairs to R.H. Myers, to the people, to make sure they took care of it. And in the end, she was right. Someone did fall down, and thanks to her carefulness and her watchfulness, she really saved the person from a difficult fate. Another thing about her, the way she showed her love was through food. And there are many foods that she was very famous for. She's famous for her Toll House cookies that she baked so perfectly. And the family was talking about her lemon cake. And so the word is she left her recipes, so if you want to taste them, you have to just put a little pressure on these guys to make sure that they take care of them. But one of her finest creations was her chopped liver that everyone loved, even people who weren't from that generation. And she had just the perfect attachment for her KitchenAid that made just the right onions and liver, and it came out so perfectly. And it was something she really specialized in, and she really loved to make for everyone so much. The thing about her was that she was so reliable. She was really like a Swiss watch. You knew what day of the week it was because what was she doing? Was she doing the laundry on that day? Or what was for supper? If it was Tuesday or Wednesday, based upon some of those details. And she had a way of her that was just so predictable and so much also organized. But she just had such a big heart and such a love and such a caring that she would just kind of jump out of the schedule and just do whatever you needed to do, help you in whatever way was possible. There was a funny story, which I may share. Again, it's about R.H. Myers, about how much she was into her routine. So for many, many years, the family wanted to get her to R.H. Myers, and, there was a waiting list. It was very, very hard to get in. You waited and waited for them to call you, for that big phone call, that there's a room available at R.H. Myers. And so finally, one day, she's at home, she's doing the laundry, and she's in the middle of her very organized day doing her laundry, and the head person, the administrator, calls with a jubilant voice, Mrs. Fuldauer, we finally have a place for you at R.H. Myers. When are you ready to move in? And what does she say? She said, can you call back later? I'm doing the laundry right now. And so, of course, her family was there, and they said, Mom, what are you doing? Call her right back and tell her that you want that apartment. So anyways, I hope I did my duty of telling stories that were not too sad. And there's just so many stories, and I think they all fit beautifully into this theme, that she was the most special lady. She did so much good for this world, and so much good for her family. And I didn't speak a lot for her, for her goodness to her family, because I think it's self-evident. When you see her children and her grandchildren, you see how they respect her and they love her and they appreciate her. And you see in many ways they're a lot like her. A lot of her traits and her specialness, is in them. And so I think that if I were to say, oh, what a great mother she was and how kind she was to them, it would kind of be redundant. I think we all know that. And I think one of the greatest things about her was that she felt loved and respected and appreciated by her own family. And she knew that until the very day of her passing. And it was a difficult illness, for her. Somehow that strength that she had and that resilience was in her body, and she didn't want to let go. And she broke almost all the records in the Menorah Park Hospice program. Doctors could not explain her resilience, but the fact that she just lived a good life and she took care of herself, and she was always so positive. She always didn't sweat the small stuff. Maybe that's what gave her the resilience. But just maybe the fact that her family was just so good to her. In particular Enid, who was always there, always taking care of business, and always being responsible when stuff came up. Everyone was always there for her, but, being that one person who we could always call and say, we got a problem, we got to discuss it with you. But anyways, the cherry on the cake really is her grandchildren, who are here and really, give her so much praise and love. And so I'm going to call upon her grandson to say a few words.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming. I know my grandmother was a very, very loving woman. She had an immensely strong memory, and she would have really loved seeing all of you here. I just want to share a few things from my perspective as one of the grandchildren, and to speak to some of that love that she showed us. So from the very, very start, she was always there for myself, for my sister, for my cousins, whatever we had going on. She would always make sure that she and my grandfather were there. By the way, we called her Nanny, and my grandpa was Papa. So from here on out, Nanny and Papa is what I'll be saying. So she would be there from coming to the JCC when we were in preschool and doing swimming. She would, when my mom started working again once a week on Thursdays, they were always at our house ready to take us to Chagrin Falls. And my sister Carly and I always looked forward to that Thursday where we would get to go out with Nanny and Papa. And those were very special times for us, and that love continued all the way through our entire life. When we were still growing up, they would have us over for sleepovers, sometimes when my parents were out of town, sometimes just because, and we always looked forward to those trips. And that also continued all the way through pretty much the present. When she was at Myers, when my parents would go on vacation, my grandma, Nanny, she would call me and, hey Ryan, just want to see if you're okay, do you need dinner? And so I would always go over to either, when she was still at her house, to Bendemeer. She would make me dinner, make sure that I had food to eat, just like a Jewish grandmother should. And when she went to Myers, she would have me over for the meals there for dinner. And one thing about her, she was immensely, immensely proud of all of her family. And whenever I would go over to Myers for dinner when my parents were out of town, she would parade me around to all of her friends in the entire facility. And this is my grandson, Ryan. This is what he's up to. He just graduated from Miami. He's working as this. She would tell everybody, and we would walk around and I would meet everybody, and she just lit up when she was able to do that. And it speaks to the person that she was, how much she cared, and we really, really appreciate her always being there. One thing that I should mention, since it's October, they always came over for Halloween, and And so whenever we would get back with our bags of candy, we'd dump them out on the ground. And my grandma, she was a spry woman until just a few years ago, and so she would get down on the ground with us and pick out all her favorite Kit Kats. And I came across a picture last night of her on the ground, just like with a handful of Kit Kats, like she won the lottery. It's great. And that's who she was. She wanted to get involved with us in our life and wasn't afraid to have fun. She also had a good sense of humor. She loved, no pun intended, she loved Lucy. She was very happy to come with us to Playhouse Square to see Carol Burnett. She loved all that kind of stuff too. She loved having a good laugh with people. So just to wrap it up, we really, on behalf of all of the grandkids, my cousins Brett and Seth, my sister Carly, my brother-in-law Devin, and myself, we really, really appreciate all the love over all the decades that she showed us. And we love you, Nanny. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your beautiful words. And I feel like there's so many stories, and I could add some more stories, but the hour is a little bit late. But I just want to make a quick mention of her dear sister. Anita came to visit all the time, and she was the moral support, and she was the encouragement. And, for so many years, your sister was so strong, and you could just do a lot of fun things together. But in the last few years, when it wasn't easy to visit, you're always there for her, and you always did the best you could to make her laugh and to make her happy. So now following services, we're going to be having the interment, which will take place at Mount Olive Cemetery. And it'll be in the Jewish War Veterans section, of course, right next to our beloved Don. And then following the interment, the family will be receiving friends and other family members at the residence of Enid and Alan Friedman, which is 5146 Graham Road in Lyndhurst. It's going to be today until 8 p.m. And there's going to be also on Wednesday, Shiva hours at the home from 1 to 4 p.m. and then 6:30 until 8:30 p.m. Contributions are not required by any means, but if you would like to do so, you can do so to the Lasky Weintraub Caregiver Fund for the Menor Park Hospice. So at this moment, what we're going to do is we're going to please rise, and we're going to ask the pallbearers to please come forward. And the custom is that we have the deceased in front of us. The family walks behind the casket, behind the deceased, and then everyone else kind of files in behind that group. We may have an opportunity for some pallbearers if anyone wants to come forward. It's not really heavy lifting. Okay, so we have 6 pallbearers. One more? One more. Okay.
Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to step up this aisle. We're going to bring the casket to you. If you go up this way, my staff will show you where to line up. Family members, we're going to follow behind the casket, go directly up to our vehicles, and then I'll ask you friends to follow behind you. Friends, I'll ask you to step directly to your cars, please. If you're driving with us to the cemetery, I will remind you that you need to manually turn on your headlights during the day. Thank you. You can exit to the rear or to the front of the chapel, whatever works best for you.